Hi everyone. So I'm Sean. I'm a QA manager in IA Labs, and IA Labs is the sort of digital accessibility arm of the National Council for the Blind of Ireland. So just with changes in legislation around accessibility, where public body websites, digital documents, and applications have to be accessible, we decided, because of our vast experience in working in that area, open an organization called IA Labs, which we would help audit websites, applications, and digital documents to allow developers and graphic designers and anyone else on that chain to learn how to make these things accessible. And we test for pan disabilities, and we use the WCAG 2.1 guidelines for that. So we would use their checklists, their success criteria when we are checking digital documents or websites or applications. And we've a lot of experience working with a number of public and private organizations. I suppose one of the biggest things we were working on recently was the COVID tracker app. So the HSE approached us with their developer with a beta version of that application, and we would test and audit that for accessibility, and we would draw up an issue log of all the issues we found. So we found quite a number of issues, and their developers were able to repair them and make them accessible. So anyone with a disability was able to use that app. Now, they did make a few mistakes by releasing maybe updated versions that they didn't check for accessibility. We've been working on every version since then to make sure that it continues to be accessible, and the same with a lot of public websites and applications and their digital documents. So we're constantly working on this. We decided to do a training session today on something that, while not simple, is a lot simpler than testing a website or application, and that's like a digital document. And we'll be discussing PDFs this morning. So when we build a PDF, we have to make sure that that's accessible also. Like a PDF in itself is almost like a mini website. We have to check for headings, we have to check for color contrast, we have to make sure images are labeled, etc. So we'll sort of go through the process, and any questions along the way, feel free to ask, and we'll do a few small demonstrations of how that works. So just we'll do a bit of a workflow. We'll discuss converting to a PDF, prepping files, the Acrobat Pro interface, discuss tags, because we have to tag elements within these documents. We'll discuss reading order and tabbing order, and we'll explain the difference. And we'll discuss tools to check PDF accessibility. We'll do a few live demonstrations. We'll discuss alternative text for images, infographic headings, forms, and we sort of reiterate the logical reading order because you'll have a bit more knowledge on it then. And we discuss testing with the likes of screen readers, and then we'll do another live demonstration, and we'll come back to maybe color contrast and print versions. So a bit of a background to PDFs. So PDFs were designed to be a universal document that you can open on any platform, or with any application, or any application that can open a PDF. Like in the past, people might have been using things like maybe Microsoft Word documents, and you'd have to make them accessible also, but you might be then dictating to your audience that you might need Microsoft products to open this document. So with a universal document like a PDF, you have a greater reach to your audience, and greater reach through different devices and platforms, etc. But there is a certain amount of preparation for any digital document, but with a PDF also, to make it accessible, you have to do a few things before you release that to the public, and we'll be discussing that during this presentation. So workflows, if we use a screen reader as an example, a screen reader is a tool that people who are blind and visually impaired would use to navigate websites, and screen readers move through digital documents, websites, or applications from element to element. So it's quite a linear system of they're going to move from element to element to element, and that has to represent the reading order. So as we are designing a PDF and we're laying it out, we want the eye to read it a certain way. So like when we're thinking about, UX and UI, when we're building websites or applications or even digital documents, we're always thinking about how the eye is going to flow through the page and go to the next piece of logical information. We have to make sure that's correct for screen readers also. Like a major problem with screen readers and digital documents is the reading order mightn't have been set. So when a person with a visual impairment or maybe this dyslexia or dyspraxia who is using a different type of reading tool will come to the document, it could start in the middle and then maybe go up to a heading and then down to an image. And it's not sequential. And the information's been relayed to that person in an incorrect order. And it's very frustrating and it's very hard to understand. So screen readers have to move through it as we want to move through it. So we have to take a bit of, we have to be cognizant of what a reading order is, what a tabbing order is, and we'll go into more on that throughout this demonstration. So sometimes people convert to a PDF from a Word document, and that could be as simple as file, save as, and then you choose PDF from the drop-down box. That will convert the Word document to PDF, but that doesn't mean that it's accessible. Even if you have added some accessibility to your Word document, it doesn't always get transferred over, especially things like reading order. Maybe a few alt tags might get transferred over, but not the full document as you intended it to be. So we have to be aware of that when we're saving just as a PDF. And there is plugins from Acrobat Pro that you can use that to save a Word document as a PDF, and it will do a better job of bringing over tags and labeling. So if you've labeled a table in Word, it will bring over that labeling for you, but you still always have to check it after the fact. So converting to a PDF automatically is getting you maybe 30–40% of the way there if your Word document is already accessible, but it's not the final answer. So if a client was asking you to make a digital document accessible for them, as there's going to be a lot of asks now because of this new legislation, we have to be aware that just saving as a PDF is not making it accessible. There's a lot more steps to that, and we'll discuss that as we move through the document. So starting a prepping file. So like we we're saying there, Word documents always read sequentially. They always start from top to bottom. That's the main benefit of a Word document. But they're not as nice to design. You're not giving the client, exactly what they're asking for. It just looks like a printed page with a few images in it and maybe a few tables. So when we build a PDF, we're obviously building it maybe more like a magazine, more like a newspaper, or more like a brochure. That's giving you a lot of control in your design. So we just have to make sure we'll check that reading order afterwards. It's actually quite simple to do. So people will often build things like in Canva or InDesign. Like we're saying, when you export out, that export process can sometimes help with accessibility, but we'll always have to check after the fact. So the Acrobat Pro interface, we find working with Acrobat Pro for making a document accessible is the best tool currently. It has, sometimes it can leave a lot to be desired in terms of its interface, but it actually works best in repairing accessibility. So there's like an auto tag document field here, which will try and auto tag the document for you. It will get a lot of that wrong, and you'll have to manually change it anyway. Then you'll have like reading options. You can see different reading orders, etc. Like down here. There's an accessibility report and check, which will run through the document and tell you maybe if you have any colors that are not correct, or if any form fields are not labeled, things like that. So we would normally click the accessibility icon down here first. So as the people are probably quite familiar with it, Apple use a very similar accessibility logo, and that will bring off the accessibility information here. So this is an example of tags within a PDF document. So we have things like paragraphs, headings, links, images, decorative content, and tables. So we need to highlight maybe a heading here, which is, we chose an NCBI document here. So heading level 1 would be NCBI. The text below that is purely, paragraph. So we'll highlight that and make that a paragraph. The next one is NCBI Labs. So we'll highlight that and we can make that a heading 2. And then likewise, this is all paragraph information. This is an image, so we label that as a figure. And then here's a table, so we label that as a table. And that is allowing, when a screen reader moves through that document, to see, well, this is heading level 1. So to know they're at the start of a piece of information. The next part is paragraph information related to that heading. And then we have a heading level 2 after that, which is a subheading of heading 1, of course. So we have to always make sure that these are sequential. We can't go from heading 1 to heading 4. Visually on screen, that might look fine because, different in text sizes, etc. So we'll have, heading level 1 will be large, and we don't mind if the heading level 4 is slightly larger than paragraph text, because visually we can say, oh, well, that's still a subheading of this heading 1. But for someone using assistive technology who has no sight at all, that's a very disorientating process where I've gone from heading 1 to heading 4. And then you're feeling, did I miss heading 2 or 3? Is the reading order not correct? Or did the designer maybe leave out some crucial information there by accident? And you're never fully sure of what the case might be there. So just for ourselves in designing these documents, heading order seems trivial, but it is very important for someone's navigation throughout a digital document. And then the figure here, which is an image. So we can't see the full tag here, but we've put in an alt tag description, which is NCBI logo, showing accessible technology. So iPhones are accessible, Android phones are accessible, Alexa, other smart speakers are accessible. Our PCs, laptops, and MacBooks all have accessibility built into them. So we're describing that in that alt text description. Alt text has to give an image some description to someone who can't see it. So when we're all learning HTML in the early days and you're drawing up a HTML website, they tell you to use all tags that you can. And we do that for the first 2 or 3 months. We'll put in some alt text descriptions for tables and images, etc. And then we kind of forget to do that going forward because it's quicker not to do it. But it actually really hinders someone who's using assistive technology down the line. So just to explain reading order in a bit more detail. So reading order moves from element to element. So all parts of the page have to be logical and sequential. Like we're saying here, the eye has to follow it in the same manner that we want the screen reader to do it, to follow it. So that's quite simple. Where if you're on a digital document, like you're going from maybe the top heading, if you have a logo, it's going to the logo, it's going to the text, it's going to the heading 2. If there's another image associated with that heading, it's going to that image. Just as we design a document and we want the eye as someone to read it naturally, we want the screen reader to follow that. So they're getting the exact same information, getting the exact same context. And that's why images have to be labeled. So images give context to the reader. We want the same context to be given to someone who can't see those images. And we'll discuss decorative images in a few moments, but tabbing order is slightly different. Tabbing order is elements that are interactive, such as buttons, links, form fields, like name, address, telephone number on a form, etc. So tabbing will move to them, and it will skip other parts of the reading order that is just maybe text-based, because you don't interact with text bar just reading it. You interact with links and buttons and things like that. And what we have to be conscious when we're designing something like that, then if you imagine if you're building like a simple example would be if you're building a login form, I would have name, address, telephone number, date of birth, and then maybe password and then confirm password. But often before the confirm password field, we might have to make this password, acceptable for use on your account. Please use uppercase, lowercase, have one special character, etc. So if we are tabbing from name, address, telephone number, date of birth, and then we tab again, we'll actually skip that instructional information and go straight into a password field. So a person might not know why they're not able to create a password because they've missed that instructional information. So we have to be sort of conscious of tabbing order and reading order in that regard. So we would often put the information maybe before the form, when creating a password, have that first and then go down through it. If that makes sense, but I mean that's kind of more advanced stuff with screen readers, but it's definitely important to know. So tools to check PDF accessibility. So there's automated tools within Acrobat Pro. So you can run an automated check and it'll go through and it'll say things here like there's 4 document issues, there's 2 page content issues. So you get down to more refined stuff. Alternative text is missing. So there's 2 images there where we haven't given a description. And then after that there, headings, so incorrect heading structure. These things are quite easy to fix with tags, and we'll get Diana to do a demonstration in a few moments on that. But so we can see here the reading order is going 2, 3, 4, 5. It's going from 5 to 7 to 9 to 11. So that we can see that the reading order is incorrect. So it's quite visual when we go to repair it. And we can see that, if we look at that's a paragraph, that's a heading 1, that's a paragraph, that's a heading 1. So we can quite easily, in a reading order, just change these numbers around. So it doesn't physically change the placement on the page. It's just actually changing which number the screen reader is going to first. So it'll actually read that sequentially and correctly. So Diana, are you able to share a document and just kind of maybe show the tagging process?
So I'll share my screen now. And here is an example document, and just to show you the full Adobe Acrobat Pro interface, the accessibility tool is here, the little purple icon, and I'll open that and it'll show up here on the side of my panel, and you can see all the accessibility options that Sean mentioned earlier. We can do a quick accessibility check just to show you how it works. So it's telling me that I have problems with my page content. I haven't tagged any elements on this page. And also I have an image that's missing alternative text. And then just to show you this page doesn't have any tags on it. So what I would do now is I would go to my reading order panel. And to tag, it's very easy actually. All I need to do is to just drag my mouse to highlight whatever elements it is I want to tag. And a pink box will show up showing that element. It might take a few tries to get the actual full text, but now I'm going to tag this as a heading 1. And here you can see if I change this radio button to structure types, it's a heading 1. This can be a heading 2. This logo is a figure, and it's telling me that no alternate text exists. I'll have to insert that myself later, and then I'll tag this as an image as well. And now that all of that is tagged, I'm going to go in and set my alternate text. So I'll name this the NCBI logo and include the tagline, working for people with sight loss. And then this next one is a smiling woman holding up a certificate for the Jared Byrne bursary. You can see here also there's an option to tag this as a decorative image. And what that will do is it will completely skip the image. If it happens to not give any context to your information, just say it was decoration just to make the PDF look nice, then I would set it as decorative. But this image is important, so I'll save and close that. Then you can see it saved my alternate text here, and I can also check the page content order. And in this case, it's correct. So what a screen reader would do is it would read this heading first, then this heading, then this image and this image. But if it was incorrect, then I would click the show order panel, and it would appear here on the side, and I could drag one of these images to a different place, and that would change the reading order. So now this would be read as the fourth element on the page. And then, yeah, that's really it for that part of the demonstration anyway.
Thanks, Dana. If anyone has any questions on that, then please feel to write them into the chat, but we will have a Q&A at the end also. Can everyone see the slideshow again? Like you can see it there, yeah, perfect. So an example of alt text. So sometimes people don't give enough information in alt text. Sometimes the worst thing is no alt text at all. That would be quite a high failure in the WCAG 2.1 guidelines. But sometimes when we're labeling images for alt text, we don't know how much information to put in there. So there's poor examples, good examples, and then just too much information for someone to grasp. So we have an image of a family at a picnic. So like we're saying, worst case scenario, no alt text. But you know, example of poor alt text would just be, oh, picnic. So screen would just go image picnic. It doesn't give much information. An example of good alt text would be a family having a picnic under a tree. It's giving the context that we need. Like if you are putting an image like that into a document, you know, that might be all you're trying to convey is, well, here's a family having a picnic. You know, it's quite a pleasant event or whatever. And you know, that's all we're trying to say. Some people will then write a man in a pink shirt, a woman in a white top, and a child with a blue top having a picnic under a tree. Orange juice is on the table. A shaft of light breaks through the surrounding trees. Nobody needs to know that much information. We're not trying to win Pulitzer Prizes when it comes to alt text. It's mainly give it enough context that the person is going to get what we're trying to say. Like if you imagine, if you're putting together a document and it's like maybe a document on teamwork, obviously all the text is going to contain maybe, you know, ideas and suggestions to build teamwork, but you could have maybe an image then of 5 or 6 people around a table and they all have their laptops out and there's maybe flip charts in the background. So what we're visually trying to convey with an image like that is teamwork or, you know, a good working environment. So putting that image on a website or on a document, we're trying to give context to the end user of teamwork. Now it's understood in the writing, but if we're putting in the writing, why are we putting in an image? Because we want to give extra context. So if we're giving extra context to people who can see, we should be giving extra context for people who can't. So that's why in a case like that, we would describe exactly what's happening. So whatever reason you'd use a family having a picnic, you know, you'd want to give enough context to the end user in the same manner. And it's like Diana did the NCBI logo there, and she put in working for people with sight loss as a tagline. And that's allowing someone who can't see that logo to have that information, because what often quite happens is someone will just write NCBI logo and you miss all that tagline information. And like Dan was also saying, if an image gives no context, you can set that as decorative. So a screen reader can bypass it completely. So people in the past have maybe set every image as decorative. And that's an easy thing to do. And, you know, it's an easy, quick fix, but it's actually not fair to the person who's going to be reading the document with a disability, because you won't be giving them any of that extra context. So we have to pick and choose what is context and what isn't. So sometimes you might just have a picture like that, a family under a tree, but you could have maybe like a clip art of a picnic basket somewhere else. And then you'd say, well, you know, that's kind of irrelevant. I can set that as decorative. Or on many PowerPoint presentations, like you can see here, this square up here, purely decorative, not needed at all. I can just set that as a decorative image and it'll bypass it. But I want the Inclusion and Accessibility Labs logo to be in that reading order, and I'll label that Inclusion and Accessibility Labs logo. So we always have to be aware to give enough context to the end user. So that leads us into infographics. Like, infographics are a fantastic visual tool for getting across information. And whether that's graphs, tables, or maybe like a flow like this is the evolution of social media. And, you know, we can see back in 2003, you know, MySpace, that went into Facebook in 2004, and then, you know, around the same time Flickr, and then 2005 YouTube was taking off, and Reddit, etc. We can see the names and logos. We can see a little bit of additional information, and we can see the years, and we can see it as it happens, and that's a great visual tool. But if that is purely up there as an image, we're actually going to be losing some of that information, because all text is about the size of a Twitter post or a text message. We want to convey, you know, as short and snappy as possible. So within, excuse me, within all text, I couldn't describe everything that's happening within that image. I couldn't say the evolution of social media, MySpace, its little blurb, what year it was founded. Sorry, excuse me. And then 2004, you know, Facebook became popular, a little blurb about that. That all can't be contained within an infographic. So we have to provide alternative solutions. So one would be, you know, and it's a sore point, is not use infographics at all, and have each of them as an element that someone can navigate. Like Diana was saying, that we can, you know, that could be MySpace as a heading one, you know, 2003 could be the paragraph text around that, and, you know, leading into 2004, that can be difficult to do from a design point of view and still make it flow logically. So what people have also done is, and the WCAG guidelines would recommend this, is if you're going to use an infographic like this in a digital document, you can put a link below it to a website, like maybe dedicated to infographics, especially like with NCBI. Like if we put out a report and we have maybe 50 graphs on that page, we will have a page on our website, which is a hidden page with like an anchor link to each one of them graphs and an explanation explaining what's happening. So I could put together a text paragraph explaining what's happening in this social media evolution chart, and put that as maybe like a figure one hyperlink below that, which would then bring to a page to describe it. So there is alternative solutions to getting the information across, but, you know, that can be a lot of extra work. So from the design point of view, it's always good to make the whole thing accessible, like not use an image of text. Like screen reader's never going to be able to interact with that. Someone with dyslexia or dyspraxia who would use point and click tools to read text will never be able to read any of that text, because it's solely an image. If you can't highlight it in a document, you know, an assistive technology tool won't be able to interact with it. That's kind of, you know, as a rule of thumb, if you can't highlight it, it's not going to interact with someone. So like the back to headings now. So like obviously Diana did that demonstration, which might give, you know, a bit more context. Headings are so important for navigating it. If I have no sight, I can be in a PDF document And I can down arrow through each individual element, like we're saying, and I'll go to every thing on the page as long as we've made that reading order correctly. But I might want to get there quickly. And like we were saying, while it's sequential, because we've tagged it, I can now jump to places in that document. I can press H and go straight to heading 1, press H, I'll go to the next heading. I'll keep pressing H till I get to a heading I want to get to, and then I'll down arrow from there and read the rest of it. So I might press H 3 times in this example here till I get to this link, and then I can down arrow and actually get onto that link. So it's understanding that simple things like heading structures are so important for quick navigation, but also for not feeling disoriented in a document, that I don't want to go from heading 1 to heading 3 and then go, well, where did heading 2 go? Is the reading order incorrect, or have I actually left, or as a designer left out a piece of information on that document? So forms, we can turn digital documents into forms, and there's lots of different approaches and ideas behind this. I personally don't like to use a digital document as a form, and it needs must sometimes, but it creates a lot of work for clerical and back end, because either people are posting you back a form and you have to manually type that into some sort of CMS or database, or you have a digital form that you have to then make accessible. And making a form in a PDF is not accessible, it's not impossible, but there's lots of steps to take here. So I would always recommend using an online form over that. Like, it's much easier to make a website accessible. You fill out the form and it automatically goes back into your CMS, and that just saves clerical time. It saves human error, from typing out or passing information between two sort of technologies. So if we make a form accessible, that can still be emailed out to someone, and we have to make sure that the edit fields are editable. We can't just draw a line in a digital document. That's fine when you can print it out and someone's going to write on that line, or if someone has sight enough to use like digital signing, but someone who is blind or visually impaired or might have other disabilities won't be able to do that. So if we have any field you expect to be filled out within the PDF, we have to make them proper form fields that you can actually physically type into. And like that brings us back to the tabbing order we were talking about. So if I tab from name, address, telephone number, it's actually going into these edit fields and they're labeled correctly. If I've tabbed into the name field, I need to know what it is. It has to be labeled name. If I tab again and it's in the date of birth field, it has to be labeled date of birth. I have to know what information you're expecting me to return. So that's something that can be done in the PDF, can be done in Word documents. It does add an extra few steps to the design phase and the testing phase, but I would always recommend, when you're expecting a form, to have maybe a website equivalent of that form to direct someone to. But if we are putting out a form, we have to make it accessible. So we'll come back to forms again in a moment when Diana will do a quick demonstration, but here's just another visual representation of logical reading orders and tabbing orders. So you might have converted this from a Word document, or you could have drawn it in Canva and InDesign, and this is what we are left with. It starts at 10, it goes to 5, then 2, then 3, then 8, then 4, 9, 6, etc. So a person's going to start off at the lowest number and then, obviously go from 2, and they'll go to 4 here, etc. And it's not the way we would want to read it. So Diana has showed us that, the accessibility checker, logic and reading order needs to be checked, because it's not always, these automated tools can't always do it. We have to check with, either visually here, where Diana has repaired it, or use a screen reader and go through it and check it. I hope that makes sense. I know this can kind of seem a bit abstract, for people who don't fully understand how screen readers work, but we'd be more than happy to discuss that in the Q&A, or if anyone's any questions, down the line or afterwards. So here's an example of, a form, like in testing with a screen reader. The screen reader is going to start off at the top of the document here. Please fill out the following forms. And then if I down arrow, it's going to go to given name and go in here. And down arrow again, it'll go into family name. And if I down arrow again, it'll say, please fill out the following important fields marked in yellow. It's reading that information again. But if I'm in given name here, this first text box, and I tab, I'll go straight into family name. So this physical label here, is fine. It's great visually, but we also have to label the box itself family name. That has to be named in the background on the document. And if I tab again, I'll miss the next piece of information. I'll go straight into this field, into this field, into this field. We always have to be aware of how we move through a document. So Diana, are you able to just share your screen and we can do a little bit of like infographics, headings, and forms?
Yes. We'll go to a just heading structure first. Just another one on the importance of heading structure in general. It's really just like creating a Word document. You want them to flow in a logical order. So you would separate all your sections by heading level 1s, and all the subheadings in that section would be number 2, 3, 4 sequentially. So for example, in this document, this main heading, are you a person living with sight loss, would be the heading level 1. And then NAN is a heading level 2. And then the question, what is an NAN, is now the level 3. Then we'll jump back to heading level 2, then heading level 3. And then the heading level 1 shows that you have finished reading through this information, and now you're into the contact details. Those are like separate sections of the document, which is why this is a heading level 1 and not as heading level 4. It's not really related to this part of the document. And then say I was using a screen reader to move through this document, and I pressed the letter H on my keyboard, I would be able to jump straight from this heading to down here. And say I had opened this document looking specifically for the contact information. Then I wouldn't need to read, because it's correctly tagged with headings and paragraphs. I don't need to read all this information. I already know. I can skip straight down here to how do I join, and then change back to my arrow keys to read the information and get the email and the phone number I was looking for. So that was heading structure. And then just as an example of an accessible form, so tabbing order, if I press my tab key now, I would be able to jump straight to the first form field in this document. And then I would go to every interactive element if I keep pressing the tab key. So if there are any links or clickable phone numbers or any more form fields, I would jump straight to them. But that would also mean that I am skipping all this text content, which is why tabbing order and reading order is so important. So I would need to make sure, if I wanted to make this document accessible, that all these form fields are labeled with their questions, that when I'm tabbing, I'm not skipping the question, and I'm not just hearing edit field for my screen reader. My screen reader is actually reading out question 1, what is the problem? Question 2, what do you want the campaign to achieve? And then, yes, I think that's it for accessible forms, really. But again, we do prefer online forms. Like Microsoft Forms are really good. They're quite accessible usually, and I think Google Forms are also an option. They're just much easier to deal with, like Sean mentioned, much easier to deal with than PDFs.
Thanks, Diana. So like Diana was saying there, like it's like I was testing a form there for a government department a while back, and it was a digital document, it was a PDF. So the first page, it was asking for name and address, and they had put in input fields there, and so I was able to put in my name and address. And then if I hit tab, I actually would bypass 15 pages worth of contract information. That would put me then into the next field, which was on the last page, which was, I think it was signature and date. So I was actually missing I bypassed completely those 15 pages. Now, don't get me, someone would know then, well, I don't know what I'm signing here and have to navigate backwards, but why not have all the form information at the bottom of that document? So a person's not having to traverse from the first page to the 15th page and then go back and forth between the remaining 13 pages. So there's things like that we have to kind of look out for when we are, you know, testing documents, and kind of just for that end user experience. So color contrast is very important, and people with low vision or certain color blindness or just other conditions can't see some low contrast material. So we have to check that we give enough contrast when we are putting together a document. Like you'll often see on documents, like in this example here, where the background is white, but someone might have put maybe the date in gray below a heading, or maybe some other information in gray, and maybe 60-70% of the people can read that, but it actually fails the WCAG guidelines for normal size text, large text, and, you know, on user input and graphical information, because the contrast is so low. Now, something that is extremely high would be like green on black. You can see that that's 13.11 to 1 contrast ratio as opposed to 1.41 to 1. Now, that's just an example of two kind of either ends of the scale. Not everyone's going to use old sort of PC terminals, color contrast of green and black. But like, you know, green and yellow you often see as, sorry, black and yellow you'd often see on public signs because they're so high contrast. Now you can always find a contrast level that will work to the branding that you need to work on. But that might mean maybe darkening a shade of the background color or lightening the foreground color. You will always find an example of what you need, but you can use tools like this, like the AIM color contrast checker online. You can put in your background color and foreground color, and it will tell you if you've met the guidelines. Because a lot of government departments, ever since this new legislation where, you know, we're saying websites, applications, digital documents have to be accessible on public digital content. A lot of people are suffering from color contrast issues where their branding might have been maybe like a turquoise and green, and that looks great in a logo for whatever combination the logo is. But when we get to the graphic design stage of documents or a website, someone goes, oh, I'll use the green background and I'll put that lighter turquoise as maybe a heading or text. And then the contrast will always be as low as this, where, you know, technically it's failing against the WCAG guidelines. So we have to be very aware of, like, rebranding, if we're ever rebranding an application or a website, or, you know, an organization's rebranding, what colors they're choosing, like, and you have to be cognizant of, well, that might be fine in your logo, but as a graphic designer then going to apply them images, colors throughout the site, and we're going to use it as text, and what colors will they be using it on? So we have to be always conscious of that. And like I said, there's great tools online to check that if you need it. So print versions, this is where, you know, it can get slightly confusing. Sometimes when we're going to print, like a page like this might be split in half, or, you know, it could be staggered if we're reading it. So if I'm with a screen reader and I'm reading this page here, I know it'll be like triathlon wetsuits, and then it'll read this bit of text, then this bit of text in here. But I wanted to go on to this page. I don't want to go down to these images yet until I've actually finished the text. So we'd have to make maybe a page landscape for a digital document, like going to print and whatever way you need to split up a page, that's fine. We can always be aware of our print version. But the digital document will always need to flow. So screen readers are going to have to read this, maybe go to that image over here, come to the text here, read the text, go across, and come down to these images, and then get an explanation of each image here. And that's what we just have to be aware of, because if that page is split, the reading order will also be split. So while it might not seem, important, it does happen quite a lot that a person actually missed half a page, and then when they read the new page, the reading order is incorrect because of that. So that's more or less the end of the presentation. Obviously, there's a lot more detail we can go into on digital documents, but just to give you an idea of some of the stuff we do overall is like mobile applications, websites, and documents. We do accessibility statements. Websites, if they're public, they need to have an accessibility statement stating that they were audited, what their current rating is, whether they're A, AA, or AAA against the WCAG guidelines, and that has to have the date of when that audit was carried out. So that's one of the services we provide. We also provide accessibility as a service where we would consult with a lot of people, and like if they're building something or designing something, we'll come in, give advice, see what they've currently built or wireframed out, or even after the fact, we can give advice. So at any stage throughout a project. Document accessibility advice and reports. So we would test these documents for people. We can also repair them for accessibility if someone doesn't have those skills. We do training in that also. We've trained a lot of organizations on how to make these documents accessible, which would be similar to this, but obviously in more detail. And we do UX testing with people with disabilities. So we have a number of people with different disabilities who can help us test these sort of platforms. And we can help people design UX and UI that allow people with disabilities to use it in an inclusive manner. And because when you're testing something for accessibility, you're actually really getting down into the nitty-gritty of testing, that you actually find so many functional issues. So we've been working with a number of state organizations as their accessibility testers, but because we're delivering so much information on functional stuff we were finding, we've actually taken over a lot of their functional testing as well as for accessibility testing.